Somewhere between the temple bells and his laughter, I stopped lying to myself. The morning mist clung to the mountains like secrets as Kamon's truck wound its way up the narrow road toward Doi Inthanon. I'd been in Thailand for 5 days now, and each morning brought something new. A different temple, a hidden waterfall, a local festival I'd never heard of. But this morning felt different. Maybe it was the way Kamon had smiled when he picked me up, or how he'd brought an extra thermos of coffee just in case, or the fact that for the first time since I'd arrived, we were going somewhere completely alone. No Emma with her knowing looks and pointed comments. No other tourist to provide a buffer. Just us, the mountains, and whatever was building between us that I was finally ready to acknowledge. "You're quiet this morning," Kamon observed as we climbed higher, the air growing cooler and thinner. "Second thoughts about hiking?" "No second thoughts," I said, which was mostly true. The hiking part, anyway. It was everything else I was having second, third, and fourth thoughts about. Just thinking. About? About how your hands looked on the steering wheel when you picked me up. About the way you said my name when you knocked on my door. About how I've been lying awake at night replaying every conversation we've had. About how different this is from my normal life, I said instead. "A week ago, the most adventurous thing I did was try a new coffee shop." Kamon laughed. "And now you're climbing mountains in Thailand with a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore," I said without thinking, then felt heat creep up my neck. "I mean, you don't feel like one." Something shifted in his expression, became softer. "You don't feel like one either." The trail we took from the parking area was well maintained but steep, winding through dense forest that filtered the morning light into golden patches. Kamon set an easy pace, stopping frequently to point out birds I'd never seen before or to explain the significance of different plants. But I found myself paying more attention to him than to the nature around us. The way he moved with sure-footed confidence, how his voice changed when he talked about things he was passionate about, the way he unconsciously reached out to steady me when the path got rocky. "There," he said as we crested a particularly steep section. "Worth the climb?" I looked up from where I'd been watching his hands gesture and felt my breath catch. The forest had opened up to reveal a viewpoint that stretched for miles, mountain peaks rolling away into blue distance, valleys shrouded in mist that made the whole world look like a watercolor painting. "It's incredible," I breathed, fumbling for my camera. "How did you know about this place?" "My grandmother used to bring me here when I was young," he said, settling onto a fallen log that made a natural bench. "She said it was important to see how small you are sometimes. Puts things in perspective." I took a few shots of the view, then lowered my camera to really look. He was right. From up here, all my worries about the future, about job prospects and 5-year plans and what my parents thought about my sabbatical, seemed ridiculous. There was just this moment, this place, this person beside me who somehow made everything else fade into background noise. "Can I ask you something?" I said, settling onto the log beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "Always. Why do you do this? The guiding, I mean. You could do anything, your English is perfect, you obviously know a lot about history and culture. You could work in tourism management or teaching or—" I trailed off. "I guess I'm wondering if this is what you really want to be doing." Kamon was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the mountains. "Honest answer? Please." I started because it was easy. Family business, you know? And I liked showing people around, helping them see what makes this place special. But lately... He paused, seemed to choose his words carefully. "Lately I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Going through the motions of what I'm supposed to want instead of figuring out what I actually want." The honesty in his voice made my chest tight. "That sounds familiar." "Does it?" "Very. Except I had to get laid off to realize it." "You're smart enough to figure it out on your own." "I don't know about smart," he said with a rueful smile. "Emma says I'm an overthinker. Too careful, too worried about disappointing people to take any real risks." "What kind of risks?" He looked at me then, and something in his expression made my heart start hammering. "The kind that might change everything." The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. I had the sudden, wild urge to lean closer, to close the gap between us, to find out if the electricity I felt every time we were near each other was mutual. But before I could work up the courage, the sound of other hikers approaching broke the spell. "We should probably head to the waterfalls," Kamon said, standing and brushing off his jeans. "Beat the crowds." The hike to the waterfalls took us deeper into the forest, following a stream that grew louder and more insistent as we walked. Kamon pointed out different species of trees and flowers, shared stories about the hill tribes who still lived in these mountains, but I found myself only half listening. Instead, I was cataloging details I wanted to remember, The way sunlight caught in his hair, how he moved with easy grace over the uneven terrain, the sound of his laugh when I made a particularly terrible joke about jungle survival skills. When did this happen? I wondered as I watched him crouch beside the stream to fill our water bottles, his movements economical and sure. When did looking at him become the most interesting part of any view? But I knew when. It had been happening gradually since that first moment at the airport, building with every shared glance and casual touch and moment of easy conversation. What I was only now admitting to myself was how completely I'd fallen for him. And how terrifying that was. The waterfall, when we reached it, was worth the hike. A curtain of white water dropping 50 feet into a pool so clear I could see fish swimming near the bottom. But what made it truly beautiful was the way Kamon's face lit up when he saw my reaction. "First waterfall?" he asked. "In person, yeah. We don't have a lot of these in Seattle." "Swimming?" he suggested, gesturing to the pool. I hesitated. I'd brought swim shorts on the off chance, but there was something about the idea of being in the water with him, of seeing him without his shirt, that made my already confused feelings spike into dangerous territory. I started to say, then stopped. Because Kamon was already pulling his t-shirt over his head, revealing a lean, golden torso that made my mouth go dry. Oh, I thought desperately. Oh, this is definitely not helping my confusion. "The water's perfect," he called, wading in without any apparent self-consciousness. "Come on, you'll regret it if you don't." He was right, of course. I'd regret a lot of things about this trip if I let fear make my decisions. So I pulled off my own shirt, trying not to notice how Kamon's eyes tracked the movement, and waded into water that was shockingly cold and absolutely perfect. "Better?" he asked when I'd adjusted to the temperature. "Much better," I said, though better wasn't exactly the word for being chest deep in a mountain pool with a man who was making me question everything I thought I knew about myself. We floated and talked and laughed as the sun climbed higher, Kamon pointing out different birds that came to drink at the stream, me taking photos when I could manage to keep my camera dry. But mostly I just watched him, the way water droplets caught in his eyelashes, how his hair looked when it was slicked back, the unconscious grace with which he moved through the water. I'm attracted to him, I admitted to myself finally, the thought as clear and sharp as the mountain air. Not just platonically attracted, not just impressed by his kindness or his knowledge or his smile. I want to touch him. I want to kiss him. I want to know what his skin tastes like and how he sounds when he's breathless. The realization should have been shocking. Should have sent me into a panic about my sexuality and what this meant for my future and how I was going to explain this to my family. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Of course, some part of me whispered, "Of course it's him. Ryan." Kamon's voice cut through my internal revelation. "You okay? You look a little..." "I'm fine," I said quickly, though I was pretty sure fine wasn't the word for having a sexual awakening in a Thai mountain pool. "Just thinking. About you. About how you make me feel like I'm finally awake after years of sleepwalking. About how scared I am that this is just vacation attraction and will disappear the moment I leave Thailand. About how I don't want this to end," I said instead, which was true enough. Something flickered across his face, surprise, pleasure, maybe hope. The trip. All of it. This being here. Feeling like... I struggled for words. Like I'm finally living my actual life instead of the one I thought I was supposed to want. "I know the feeling," he said softly. We looked at each other across the few feet of water between us, and I felt that same electric tension that had been building for days. His lips were slightly parted, his eyes dark and serious, and for a moment I thought he might move closer, might close the distance between us. Instead, the sound of voices approaching the waterfall broke the spell, and we both moved apart as a group of French tourists appeared on the trail. "We should probably head back," Kamon said, though he didn't sound particularly enthusiastic about it. Long drive down the mountain. The hike back was quieter, both of us lost in our own thoughts. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. If anything, it felt charged with possibility, like we were both processing the same realization and trying to figure out what to do about it. It wasn't until we were back in his truck, winding our way down the mountain road, that Kamon spoke again. "Ryan. Yeah. I'm glad you came to Thailand." "Me too," I said, and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. "Even if it's complicated things for you?" I looked over at him, surprised by the question. "What makes you think it's complicated things?" He was quiet for a moment, focused on navigating a particularly sharp curve. "Just a feeling. You seem like you're figuring something out." "You have no idea," I thought. But what I said was, sometimes complicated is good. Sometimes it means you're finally paying attention. His smile in response was soft and real and made my heart do things that were becoming dangerously familiar. As we drove back toward Chiang Mai, the mountains falling away behind us and the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance, I found myself thinking about risks. About the chances we take and the ones we don't, about the difference between being safe and being truly alive. A week ago, I would have said I was playing it safe, taking a nice, uncomplicated vacation to a beautiful country, seeing the sights, taking some photos, maybe gaining some perspective on my life. Instead, I was falling for a man I'd known for 5 days, in a country I'd never visited, feeling more like myself than I had in years. Emma would probably call it progress. I was starting to think she might be right.